millions of books in the FNAF franchise, wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to know all the essential information without having to try and get a loan? Well, welcome to the 5th episode of FNAF Simplified, where today we'll be talking about the start of the FNAF literature, Five Nights at Freddy's, The Silver Eyes. In this series we go game by game, and now book by book, gathering information in the order it was intended, in the hopes to put together a timeline without too much contradiction or confliction. Now before we do start, I do want to say that whilst the novel don't take place in the game continuity, well, to quote Scott Cawthon himself, sometimes a timeline gets so full that the only way to tell a real story is to have the story set in a different timeline, an alternate universe, a different location, or perhaps from a vantage point that isn't entirely what it appears to be. Then why tackle the books? Why spend the past 2, now 3 weeks combing through this book every spare second of the day between movie teasers and other possibly game canon books for what? Why? Why do that? Well, this book is the key to the very beginnings of the timeline, including Fredbear's family diner, so bear with me. Pun intended. With this being a nearly 400-page book, I'll try to condense this down as much as possible with it broken into chapters, and without further ado, let's just dive into chapter 1, shall we? We start our story with our protagonist Charlie driving into Hurricane, Utah for a dedicated scholarship ceremony in honor of her childhood friend Michael, who died some 10 years ago in July 1985. With some time to kill before meeting her friends at a local diner, Charlie heads to her father's old house, with their father seeming to be an inventor or roboticist of some sort. Half buried in the gravel a few feet away was a piece of metal, and Charlie went to pick it up. It was jointed in the middle, and she held it in her hand, smiling a little as she bent it back and forth.
An elbow joint,
she thought.
I wonder who that was going to belong to.
A recurring note in this book is Charlie's fear of a certain animatronic with silver eyes, hence the naming. In a darkened corner behind her father, barely visible, hung a jumble of metal limbs, a twisted skeleton with burning silver eyes. Every once in a while it gave an uncanny twitch. Charlie tried never to look at it, but as her father worked, as she played with her makeshift toys, her eye was drawn back to it again and again. The limbs, contorted, seeming almost mocking, the thing a ghastly gesture, and yet there was something about it that suggested enormous pain. We get some filler as Charlie arrives at the diner to meet her childhood friends John, Jessica and Carlton. But we do get some more information about Charlie and her mysterious dad, as Jessica jokes about Charlie being the oldest daughter. They decide to go back to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, only to find it encased by a partially built mall, seemingly abandoned towards the end of the project, with the shell of the building and some of the shops complete, but with piles of bricks and building supplies dotted around. After almost getting caught by the night guard, they find the back door to Freddy's, hidden behind a shelf attached to it for storing tools during the mall's construction, as well as a sheet of tarpaulin shielding the alleyway. Once in, they wander around the pristine pizzeria, seemingly frozen in time with it unchanged since they left the previous decade. It's described as being the FNAF 1 location, but now there's the addition of a carousel, which would explain the occasional bursts of circus pipe organ during the night shifts, as well as an owner's office. They head to Pirate's Cove, but before they can see Foxy, whom Charlie is terrified of, Carlton knocks over some pots in the kitchen, so they leave before the guard can find them. We get some more filler about Jessica as she and Charlie stay at a motel. Marla and her younger brother Jason arrive as they head back to the diner the next morning, with John, Carlton and Lamar, another childhood friend who had also arrived that morning, waiting there for them. At breakfast they discuss possessions and the paranormal, which whilst this should be taken with a grain of salt since it's the characters' opinions, this could be a way of expressing the world's rules via the characters. Marla looked around her friends.
What?
She said defensively.
I don't believe in ghosts. I do,
Charlie said. She felt like she was talking from a great distance. She was almost surprised that they could hear her.
I mean, not ghosts, but memories. I think they linger, whether there's someone there or not.
The house, her old house, was imbued with memory, with loss, longing. It hung in the air like humidity, The walls were saturated like the wood had soaked it in. They debate about whether memories can haunt a place, calling out old houses and dolls as evidence, but pointing out how memories exist within the mind and we can pick up subconscious cues. They then head to the ceremony at the school, where a scholarship in Michael Brooks' honour is being introduced, awarded to graduating seniors, second year of college for Brits, for excellence and a passion for the arts. During the ceremony, they mentioned that several other children went missing along with Michael. Carlson gives a quick speech, and the first award is given to a student, Anne Park. After the ceremony, John and Charlie go to her father's old house, checking out the workshop. All the blueprint parts and projects are all missing, as well as the twitchy endoskeleton with silver eyes. All the tools were polished and clean, the wooden handles smooth and the metal unrusted. They looked as though they had been used just that morning, wiped down and put away meticulously, like someone still cared for them. Evidently, someone has been coming to the workshop regularly, judging by the state of the tools. Even if someone had only come recently, the tools should be rusted and unusable, meaning whoever took the blueprint must have been coming often enough to prevent the corrosion of the tools. As they leave, John confesses he thinks he saw the murderer when Michael went missing, dressed as a yellow bear, but was distracted by the band going haywire on the stage. Which is pretty fair enough. Quick break from the summary, we already have a bit more information about the missing children's incident. From the games, we know that a total of 5 kids were lured and murdered by a purple guy wearing a yellow springlock suit, who we presume to be Spring Bonnie. Now, this could be Scott trying to course correct with the Fredbear suit being used during the MCI instead, or this could be one of the differences between the books and games. It could potentially be an explanation for Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie, memories of the murders taking the form of the suit used. It's plausible, but there's not much in the games to say that this could be the explanation. Also, how would Purple Guy put kids in Golden Freddy if he's wearing Golden Freddy? Doesn't quite make sense. We also get a year for the murders, 1985. Now, Charlie does say July, not June, but due to the information we get later in the book, it's safe to assume she didn't leave immediately after the MCI. The gang heads back to Freddy's, this time finding control rooms hidden beneath the show stages, with security monitors and control panels for the animatronics. Jessica, Carter, Marla and Lamar try to get the speakers to work in Pirate's Cove control room, and Jessica thinks that she can hear a voice in the static, Carter saying it sounded like singing. Charlie runs into Pirate's Cove and finds herself with Foxy, whom she identifies as the twitchy endo from the workshop, and gets cut by his hook when Marla accidentally knocks into a button. They leave to go to a pharmacy and then head back to the motel. Charlie and John wake before everyone else to go for a walk. Charlie then tells him about her father's first restaurant before Freddy's, a little diner with a bear and a rabbit. We get some backstory about her life at the diner with her twin brother Sammy. Then Charlie and John go to a nearby town in New Harmony to find the diner, finding it by some train tracks, revealing it to be none other than the fabled Fredbear's Family Diner. Unlike Freddy's, Fredbear's was cleared out prior to its closing. Whilst exploring Fredbear's, shares a couple of flashbacks, one of Sammy being kidnapped by a yellow rabbit, and another of her father warning them about the danger of the springlocks. They have dinner with the others, then all return to the mall housing Freddy's, this time the guard waiting for them at the alley, who we learn is called Dave Miller. He explains that the town built the mall around the pizzeria, sealing it inside the mall, due to no one wanting to lease Freddy's due to what happened, and that no one wanted to open a shop in the mall because it didn't feel right. I think it's got an aura, a mystical energy baby if you believe in that sort of thing. Dave wiggles his fingers in the air as though casting a spell. As they return to the control room on the stage, it becomes obvious that Dave knows how to operate the animatronics despite claiming it's just beginner's luck. Jason returns to the arcade and sees a drawing of Bonnie move. Along with some others, it creates a sequence. A child sat alone, Bonnie appearing behind them, Bonnie grabbing the child and finally, the child screaming. Drawings then start flying at him, enveloping him in red-soaked papers. They stop as Marla appears, revealing that a singular drawing had fallen in its place. Obviously, this is a hallucination, although it's much more intense than any we've seen previously in the location. In Five Nights 1, the hallucinations we saw were just text being replaced with "It's me," or poster change, or an animatronic's face consuming our vision. Lamar takes over from Dave in the control room, and with most of the animatronic's movements being pre-programmed. As he guides their motions, Bonnie breaks free of the bolt tethering him to the stage as his movements become wilder and more erratic. Charlie stood fixed in place, unable to take her eyes off the animals.
They're trying to get away.
She thought. It was a child's thought, and she tried to dismiss it, but it clung as she watched them, scarcely noticing the fitful flickering of the lights and sounds. The animatronic creatures didn't look like they were glitching. Their movements seemed not mechanical but hysterical, like there was something they needed desperately to do, but horribly could not. Deciding to leave, the gang split up to find Jason. Unbeknownst to them, Dave goes to the owner's office, for which he oddly already has the key. Strides to a tool closet and gets something with yellow fur from it. Jason sees a yellow rabbit, whom he believes is Bonnie, appear and disappear during the flashes of party lights, then watches the animatronic kidnap Carlton in front of him in Pirate's Cove. He tries to tell the others, but they ignore him until they realise Carlton is indeed missing. They decide to get his dad, the chief of police. But since they find Officer Dunn first, they take him to the mall to get Carlton. Upon entering Freddy's, however, they find the entrance chained and bolted shut. He ends up calling Carlton's dad, and once he arrives, Clay takes him to his house, where he explains Carlton's impressive pranking antics. Jason storms out, letting Clay talk to the rest about the incident. I know you were just kidding around, but I don't want to hear you kids joking about Freddy Fazbear's. You know I wasn't the chief back then. I was still a detective, and I was working on those disappearances. To this day, it was the worst thing I've ever had to see. It's not something to joke about. He looked at Charlie. His grey eyes were hard, and the lines of his face were immobile. He was no longer the friendly father figure, but the police chief, staring as if he could see right through her. Charlie had a sudden urge to confess, but she had nothing to confess to. I'm especially surprised at you, Charlie, Clay said quietly. Whilst feeling a bit shameful, they do ask if they caught anyone for the disappearances. Yes, he said quietly, we did arrest someone. I did in fact, and I am as sure now that he was guilty as I was then. There are no bodies, Clayburg said. We knew it was him, there was no doubt in my mind. The children had disappeared. They were never found, and without their bodies... He stopped talking, staring off into the middle distance, as if scarcely aware that they were there. Clay then offers they stay the night, and we get an explanation to Charlie's fear of Foxy via a dream sequence. Essentially, Charlie, as a child, goes downstairs to close the front door at night, backs away into the twitchy endo with the silver eyes, except now, it has its casing, Foxy. She runs back upstairs, her father appears, and soothes and deactivates Foxy, making it clear he cares deeply for his creations. Charlie and John are both awake and sit on the porch and talk about her dad and the MCI. John admits that people thought he did the murders, which was reaffirmed when he committed something because of the guilt. During breakfast, Betty, Carlton's mum, comes down and they explain Carlton's absence. Outraged that Clay hadn't gone searching for him, they briefly argue about whether or not it's a prank. I don't understand Freddy's. I know what happened there, what happened to those kids, he retorted. I don't understand? For goodness sake, Bessie, I saw Michael's blood streaked across the floor where he was dragged from. He stopped, realizing too late that he was surrounded by the teenagers. Betty retorts how Michael's death was catastrophic for Carlton, with him thinking about it every day since. Realizing she's right, Clay leaves to make a call. Officer Dunn returns to Freddy's, only to find the back door now slightly ajar with the chains hung loose. He enters, and after some looking around, finds the Yellow Rabbit costume in the office in a cabinet. The Yellow Rabbit pins Dunn down, attacking him. The rabbit picks him up by the neck, draws a knife, and stabs Dunn, bringing him close, killing him. Charlie and John go to investigate her father's house, looking for paperwork or photos. In her father's room, there were books on biology and anatomy, some on human beings and others on animals. There were books about the history of the travelling carnival and of the circus. There were books about child development, about myths and legends, and about sewing patterns and techniques. There were volumes that claimed to be about tricks of gods, about quilting bees, and about football cheering squads and their mascots. Most of this seems pretty self-explanatory, with biology, anatomy, and mascots, and textile books all likely being to aid the design and creation of the animatronics. The carnival and circus ones could be connected to Blue Boy, but I'm sure it doesn't mean anything. Right? Child development is likely because of parent, myths and legends, however, I think it's just a special interest. Greek mythology is very interesting. Charlie finds a photo album and some filler. Charlie and John discuss what her father committed with a flashback. It was one of his creatures, one she had never seen, and it was facing the stairs. Its head was bowed a little so that Charlie could see that the back of its skull was open, the circuits exposed. The limbs and joints lay bare, a skeleton of naked metal strung with twisting wires of bloodless circulation, and its arms were outstretched in a lonesome facsimile of an embrace. It was standing in the middle of a dark, still pool of some liquid that seemed, though it must have been imperceptible, to be spreading. She could see its face, if it could be called a face. Its features were scarcely formed, crude and shapeless. Even so, Charlie could see that they were contorted, almost grotesque. The thing would be weeping if it could have wept. She stared at it for ages, though it could have been less than seconds. No more than a glimpse as Aunt Jen swept her up the stairs. Yet she had seen it so many times since then, when she slept, when she woke, when she unguardedly closed her eyes. It would appear to her, the face pressing its way into her mind as it had pressed into the world. Its blind eyes were only raised bumps, like the eyes of a statue, seeing nothing but its own grief. In its hand, almost an afterthought, was the knife. When Charlie saw the knife, the whole thing snapped into focus. She knew what the thing was, and she knew what it had been built for. In summary, Charlie's dad built an endoskeleton with a knife attachment with the sole intention of killing himself. They then find a photo taken outside of FREDBEAR'S of the yellow rabbit and Charlie's dad dressed in the FREDBEAR'S suit. Realizing that someone's in the rabbit costume, they head to the library where they look at microfilm of newspapers, starting with the date range 1979 to 1982, in the hopes of finding information about FREDBEAR'S family dollar and that mystery man. Charlie states that she was 3 in 1982, which would then make her 16. What's that? The book said at the beginning that she was 10 years ago? Yeah, this book doesn't really know what maths is that well. Don't worry about it. It's a 50-50 chance. Charlie remembers Sammy being kidnapped during a Halloween party, so they head to November 1st, finding an article about the kidnapping, revealing that Charlie's dad and another man were co-owners. Before they can learn more about this other owner, Marla rushes in with the news that Jason's gone missing, presumably having gone back to Freddy's. Cut to Carlton, constrained in parts and service by a faded blue springlock suit's torso. The yellow rabbit enters, revealing himself to be Dave. Dave explains the springlock suits to Carlton, confirming what we know about them, and demonstrating their deadliness with a fuzzy green torso tripping the locks. That's a very old costume, one of the first Henry made. You can trip these springlocks very, very easily if you don't know what you're doing. Dave explains that Henry, Charlie's father, made the springlock suits before going into great detail what it's like if the springlocks go off with someone inside them, revealing they survived a springlock failure before. Quick break to talk about the springlocks. For those who don't know, springlock suits are essentially mascot suits just like Freddy, but the animatronic parts can be wound back to allow a performer to wear it. The main problem, and one of the reasons for their retirement, is that these springlock suits are incredibly sensitive and easy to trigger. And if someone happens to be wearing the suit when the springlocks trigger, well, let's go ask Springtrap what happens. Or apparently Dave, as he's survived one once before it seems. Now, a weird detail I want to point out here is the mention of the blue and green springlock suits. Now sure, you could argue that the blue suit is Bonnie. He's a purpley, bluey colour, and often referred to as blue. But green? There's no green animatronic, let alone a green springlock animatronic. Okay, obviously there's a green springlock suit, Dave just picked one up. Unless this is to try and explain the Happiest Day masks, where there was a green crocodile mask, where there was a blue mask that looked as if someone had been told make an animal, and had done just that, careful not to make it look like any specific type of animal. Assuming that's true, that would make the other Happiest Day masks, bar the MCI crew and puppets, springlock suits and some of the earliest made by Henry or his games parallel. Does it really affect much timeline wise? Not really, although it could put a wrench into Phone Guy telling us there's only 2 springlock suits. Let's take another listen to what he actually said.
Right now we have 2 specially designed suits that double as both animatronic and suit.
Right now. So there could have been more in the past, perhaps a fruit salad coloured crew like we see in Happiest Day and Silver Rose Parts and Service. Not to mention that we could quite easily be referring to we this restaurant as opposed to we this company. Back to reading. Finding the back door to Freddy's now welded shut, the gang will enter via a skylight in this supply closet, which houses an Endo whom Charlie tries to fight in terror. Not important, just fun. They split up, with Marla and Lamar finding Jason in the control room under Pirate's Cove, whilst John, Jessica and Charlie head to the show stage control room to find Carlton. Charlie sees Carlton as he tries to shuffle into the camera's field of vision, and she tries to rush out to help him, accidentally locking John and Jessica inside, but she encounters Bonnie. Bonnie follows her into the bathroom, with Charlie only just managing to escape. A warm burst of air rolled into the stall door. Breath? Charlie clasps her hand over her nose and mouth. The stench was unbearable. Another wave of it hit her face, hotter and more putrid. She manages to run into the room in which Carlton is held captive. After Charlie frees him from the suit, Carlton explains that the kid's murders, including Michael Brooks, possess the animatronic band. When Charlie asks how he knows that, Carlton points to the crumpled suit of Golden Freddy, who Charlie recognises as Fredbear. Whilst this is happening, Marla's group is attacked by Foxy. Although Foxy can't enter the control room, he manages to grab Jason by the leg and drag him away. Back in Parts and Service, Dave walks in whilst Charlie and Carlton are talking, Charlie knocking him out with a pipe. They flee, meeting up with John and Jessica, who have managed to kick down the door and escape the control room. They barricade themselves in the security office before heading back to Parts and Service to interrogate the unconscious Dave. After they revive him, Carlton accuses Dave of stuffing the dead kids inside the animatronics. Oddly, Dave refuses to say anything until he's given the yellow rabbit head to wear, after which his mannerisms change completely, confident, slightly melodic, and almost proud of himself. He seems to know more than he lets on, referring to the possessed animatronics being home with him and it being their happiest day. He acts particularly peculiar towards Charlie, although it's never explained nor referenced again throughout the remainder of the book. "Oh," he gasps, "you're something beautiful, aren't you?" Charlie recoiled as if he had touched her.
What's that supposed to mean?
He explains that once it's dark, the animatronics wander and will kill adults on sight. When John points out so that they would surely want to kill him, seeing as he was the one to kill them. "They don't remember," Dave said. "They've forgotten. The dead do forget. All they know is that you are here, trying to take away their happiest day." "And what makes you think they won't kill you?" John said again. And Dave's eyes took on something shining, almost beatific. "Because I am one of them." We then switch to Clay's perspective as he goes through some case files on Freddy's. There's rather a lot of information here, so I'm going to read it all, and then we'll talk about it and what it could mean for the games. There was nothing to find really. They knew who did it. At first he had suspected Henry, just like so many others around town. It was a terrible thought, but it was a terrible crime. There was no solution that would not be shocking. He had not been the one to question Charlie's father. He had read the transcript. The man had been almost incoherent, so shaken that he could not give straight answers. He sounded as if he was lying, and to most people that was proof enough. But Clay had resisted, had delayed having him arrested, and sure enough, they came to William Afton, Henry's partner. Afton seemed like the normal one in the venture, businessman. Henry was the artist. He always seemed to be off in another world, some part of his mind thinking about his mechanical creatures, even when he was holding a conversation about the weather or the kids' soccer games. There was something off about Henry, something almost shell-shocked. It seemed like a miracle they could have produced a child as apparently normal as Charlie. Clay remembered when Henry had moved to town and begun construction of the new restaurant. Someone had told him that Henry had a kid who had been abducted several years prior, but he didn't know much else. He seemed like a nice enough guy, though he was obviously terribly alone, his grief visible even at a distance. Then Freddy Fazbear's opened, and the town came alive. That was also when Charlie appeared. Clay hadn't known Henry had even had a daughter until that day. William Afton was the one who made Freddy's a business, as he had the previous restaurant. Afton was as robust and lively as Henry was withdrawn and shadowy. He was a hefty man who had the ruddy genuinity of a financially shrewd Santa Claus, and he had killed the children. Clay knew it. The whole department knew it. He had been present for each abduction, and he had mysteriously and briefly vanished at the same time as each child went missing. A search of his house had found a room crammed with boxes of mechanical parts and a musty yellow rabbit suit, as well as stacks of journals full of raving paranoia, passages about Henry that ranged from wild jealousy to near worship. But there had been no evidence, there had been no bodies, and so there could be no charge. William Afton had left town, and there was nothing to stop him. They did not even know where he had gone. Clay picked up a picture from the pile. It had been taken, framed from the wall of Henry's office at the restaurant. It was a picture of the two of them together, Henry and William, grinning into the camera in front of the newly opened Freddy Fazbear's. He stared at it. He had stared at it before. Henry's eyes did not quite match his smile. The expression looked forced, but then it always did. There was nothing unusual here, except that one of the men had turned out to be a killer. Suddenly, Clay felt a shock of recognition, something indistinct he could not quite catch. He tore open the drawer, poring through it until there it was, employee background checks requested by businesses from the last 6 months. He pulled out the stack and flipped through it, looking for photos. In the third folder he found it. He picked up the picture and held it next to the one of Henry and William, turning so his body did not block the light. It was him. The background check application was labelled Dave Miller, but it was unmistakably William Afton. Afton had been fat and affable. The man in the picture was sallow and thin, his skin sagging and his expression unpleasant, as if he had forgotten how to smile. He looked like a poor facsimile of himself, or maybe, Clay thought, looked as if he had dropped his disguise. So Dave Miller, who, if you haven't guessed by now, is a direct parallel for Purple Guy, is really called William Afton. He was co-owner of FREDBEAR'S and Freddy's. He was one of the 2 lead suspects of the MCI's killer, but got off scot-free free due to stuffing the children into the suit before escaping town. Well, finally, I no longer have to have the headache of this damn newspaper article saying he was convicted. Not that I listened to it anyway. Back in Pirate's Cove, Jason awakes upon a pile of wires, but before he can escape, Foxy returns, blocking his exit. Spotting Marla and Lamar's flashlight, he tries to wave a warning, but their flashlight shines in Foxy's eyes, as Foxy goes to launch himself and attack them. Jason trips Foxy with a spare cord before running to Marla and Lamar. They find their exit blocked by Freddy, so duck into a party room and hide under one of the tables. As Freddy goes to flip their table, Charlie and John rush in and tackle him, leading the others to the office. As they approach, however, they realise Dave has got loose and is in the office. Turning to leave, they find Chica blocking them. Charlie electrocutes her with a wire dangling from the ceiling. As they flee, they hear Dave, or rather William, scream as Bonnie enters his sanctuary. They enter the dining room, but Foxy stands atop a table, ready to pounce and take Jason again. Charlie leads Foxy away from the others and into the arcade, where, between her knocking an arcade cabinet onto him and John kicking Foxy off Charlie's leg, they temporarily take him out. They join the others again, now finding themselves surrounded by all 4 animatronics: Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie the Bunny, Chica the Chicken, and Foxy the Pirate Fox. As they prepare for their inevitable end, Golden Freddy appears. As they realise that Foxy was trying to protect Jason, Clay breaks through the wall with a sledgehammer. Golden Freddy slouches, in an empty suit, though no one had seen it move. And as they prepare to leave, the yellow rabbit grabs Charlie by the neck, forcing them to all stay. Charlie, knowing that this is the man who killed Sammy, who killed Michael, reaches inside the suit and triggers the spring locks, resulting in a similar but distinctly different scene to Follow Me's ending. Dave's eyes widened and then he screamed. Charlie jerked her hands free, barely evading the locks as they snapped open and plunged into his neck. She took a step back, watching as Dave crumpled to the ground, still screaming as his costume released. Part by part, the animatronic insides pierced his flesh, ripping up his organs, tearing through his body as if it were not even there. At some point he stopped screaming. He still writhed on the floor, for what felt like a long minutes before he was still. The animatronics drag his undying and bleeding body toward Pirate's Cove and they all leave, Clay and Carlton for the hospital, Charlie and the others to the motel. They return to the Burks where Clay explains that he'll see to it that Officer Dunn's body will be recovered, and after that, Freddy is left to rest, not wanting to desecrate it. The next morning they all part ways, with Charlie going to a graveyard to see 2 graves. We have one last flashback of Charlotte and Henry sitting outside FREDBEAR'S watching the birds, closing out the final chapter of The Silver Eyes. Now there is a graphic novel rendition of The Silver Eyes, hence the artwork that you've been seeing throughout. I hear you, this breaks a rule, the graphic novel didn't release until 2019. Here's the thing, they're the same book. Yes, the comic is even more simplified than my summary, and there are a few creative decisions, and some details are different to suit the style, but it's still the same book. I'm not doing it twice. And you said I could. See? Anyways, it gives you some pretty pictures to look instead of just me talking. Seeing this isn't part of the game's timeline, I won't be doing the regular timeline segment. Instead, I'll be going over what has specifically changed and extra information. Stuff like Sammy's kidnapping and pretty much the main events of the book will be left out, seeing as they don't seem to take place in the games. Now if a latter game comes out, say, 1 year, 11 months and 17 days later, then I suppose we'll have to add it in then. But until that very specific time frame, I'll just stick it out somewhere for now. Starting with the earliest part of the timeline, Henry No Name and William Afton opened FREDBEAR'S Family Diner in the mining town of New Harmony, Utah in the late 1970s. Henry invents the spring-lock suit, including but not limited to Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, but it retired after a child is bitten by Fredbear, leading to his death in 1983. They later open Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but when William lures 5 children to the back room, killing them and stuffing their bodies in the animatronics, the police investigate the location. Despite being certain that William was the culprit, they can't charge him due to there being no bodies. Henry possibly takes his own life, unable to bear the guilt of this tragedy happening in his own pizzeria. And that's pretty much all that's changed in the timeline. If you want to know what happens after the Missing Children's incident, then check out my previous episode of FNAF Simplified, where I tackle FNAF 4. And a big thanks to my friend Slicer for their epic voicing of Charlie and Marla. Please go out their channel here on YouTube and show them some love. And with that, goodbye for now.